the debate around fuel excise, though. Joining me is Peter Khoury from the NRMA. He's the spokesman for the NRMA. Peter, appreciate your time. First of all, what's the feedback you're receiving when it comes to fuel excise? My colleague Andrew Clennell reporting that the beer tax is going to be cut at some level in the upcoming budget, but there are 3 Liberal premiers calling for the same thing to happen with the fuel excise. Peter, what's the feedback you're receiving with your organisation?
Well, good afternoon. The NRMA represents about 2.7 million members across New South Wales and the ACT. We have, obviously, under the AAA banner, we represent around 8 million members, our sister clubs across Australia, and all motoring clubs agree that cutting the excise is not the right approach in order to provide what is clearly critical and necessary relief at the Bowser. And that is for 2 reasons. First of all, the excise is designed, and always has been, to allow the government to tax drivers who use the network, the road network, so that it can then plan forward and invest the necessary money into the necessary infrastructure and provide the necessary support to state governments and to also councils. And the council issue is really important. We were just hearing about the floods. Well, regional councils were impacted heavily by those devastating floods. They have a huge task ahead of them to fix the road network in their LGAs, and they will rely heavily on the money from that excise in order to do that, because they simply don't have the money to maintain the road network and to rebuild after that devastation. The oil price movements are so sporadic and volatile at the best of times. There is no way to compare what is currently happening to anything that has happened before. So if you marry the excise to those movements, it simply will not work. The reason why we are paying so much is because of global oil prices. What we need to see happen now is for those oil-producing countries to increase their production, and that will provide sustainable and long-term relief at the Bowser. Cutting the excise, even by half, had we done that 2 weeks ago, well, those cuts would have been well and truly eaten up by the increases at the Bowser over the last 2 weeks alone.
And is your fear, even if there's a temporary reduction, that government would then find it too hard to find a moment to be able to reinstate the excise to what it was, given the fluctuations in the price of the Bowser?
So one of the theories that was, one of the ideas that was floated was that you would cut it for a year. Well, in a year, oil prices could drop $80 a barrel, go back up again and drop a dozen times. So at what point are we introducing these cuts to provide relief? It was a little over 18 months ago that the average price was 91 cents a litre for regular unleaded. So we understand the pain that motorists are going to. The NRMA has been at the forefront of this issue, quite frankly, for almost 100 years. So we get what this means to the community. What we want to see is a meaningful reduction in the price, and we are also realistic about what the government can and can't do in that respect, and also the implications if you cut the excise at a time when the country needs money invested in infrastructure more than ever before. They are the challenges that lay ahead. If the United States and other oil-producing countries, including OPEC members, were to increase production, that would deliver significant falls. We have already, and this is something that hasn't been spoken about a lot, we have already seen pretty significant falls in oil prices over the last 24 hours. Now, if that is sustained, we are going to see falls at the Bowser beyond any cut to the excise. That's what we want to see to provide relief at the Bowser, not removing the excise at a time when we know we're going to need it.
So what is your advice in terms of the outlook on that? I mean, you've spoken about the volatility in just recent days. What's the NRMA's view in terms of the medium to longer term outlook on petrol prices?
Well, herein lies a challenge, and this is why we think the excise approach is probably the wrong way to go. Gas oil, as an example, is the international benchmark price for diesel. Diesel now is at record highs. It's significantly more expensive than petrol. Gas oil prices have fallen upwards of $46 a barrel just in the last few days. that could be sustained, in which case we would see significant falls at the Bowser, or it could spike again. And therefore, that is the challenge when it comes to trying to marry the excise to oil price movements. They are so volatile. We have never seen anything quite like this. And we've looked at this issue for decades. We have never seen anything quite so volatile. The situation is changing by the hour. We are hoping that at best, prices will now stabilise because we've seen those increases fall off. And hopefully, if those falls are sustained, we might start to see some significant falls at the Bowser in the next couple of weeks. But the challenge that we face, of course, is things are so volatile because of supply, but also obviously because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that anything can happen within the hour. And so that's why it is becoming increasingly difficult to be able to forecast what's going to happen.
And finally then, Peter, what's your and the organisation's view when it comes to what governments should do on electric vehicles and making them more widely used? Because that would preclude this sort of debate we're having right now if people were using more EVs.
Yeah, look, any measure we can do in Australia to fast-track the uptake of electric vehicles should be considered. There are some fundamentals that are now well and truly underway. One of them is obviously building charging infrastructure, and we're starting to see some progress there. The other is looking at how we can encourage businesses to upgrade their fleets. Obviously, government is doing that as well, looking at the feds and the state governments working together, looking at reducing the luxury tax so that those high-end vehicles aren't captured by the luxury tax, what we can do with stamp duty, what we can do with rego. The list is extensive. Australians are going to end up in electric vehicles. We all are. That is where the industry is heading. The sooner it happens, clearly, the better. Elon Musk himself has come out last week and said, look, the crisis we currently face in the short term, EVs are not going to be the solution tomorrow. We have to find something else. But ultimately, long term, we are definitely going to see these vehicles appearing in greater numbers in Australia. We are seeing uptake improve. Last year, of the million-odd new cars sold in Australia, about 2% were electric. That's double the year before. Globally, it's around 6%. So, we have been talking for many years now about the fact that Australia is exposed to the volatility of oil prices. We are now living that out in real time. And we know that what is happening today will at the very least convince more people that the future is heading in the right direction, and also for many Australians most likely bring that purchase forward. But the future, based on where we import our cars from, is clearly going to be increasingly electric. The sooner we get there, the better it is for family budgets, the better it is for the economy, and the better it is for our national security, because these cars are going to be charged by electricity made right here in Australia.
Peter Khoury, NRMA spokesman. Appreciate it.
Cheers.